All right. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go on to my Lord and be free. How do I turn this on? Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Let me turn that. Make sure it's on.
Right.
I can turn it up.
You can turn it up a bit.
Okay. Is it on?
Is it on? Can you all hear me?
It's not on.
No,
It's not on.
That's okay.
Is the microphone on? Down at the bottom. We can hear you see you.
Okay, good.
All right, as long as you can.
There you go. I come from a missionary Baptist tradition. And in that tradition, you also often come up to a space and you bring yourself fully into a space. And sometimes when you bring yourself fully into a space, it is more than just words. It is hymns, it is looks, it is hugs, it is a connection. And that is the connection that is necessary in movement building. That is the connection that is necessary in the work that we do. And I think it was important for me to show up in this space, as you all have shared the stories of the history of the League, and we've seen women being recognized for their work over decades. And as I am tasked with now leading in a time such as this, it was important to show up fully in this space. So first, I want to acknowledge and thank you, Kathy Jones, and the members of the League of Women Voters of Alabama membership for having me come before you today and to deliver remarks this evening. I'm honored to do so. So I stand before you as the Executive Director of the ACLU of Alabama. I am the first woman of color and the first Black woman to hold this position in the organization's 58-year history. And I find it to be an honor. Thank you for the recognition of this award, but I must say I don't do this work independently. I do this with movement lawyers. I do this work with advocates, and I do this work with activists who are on the front lines of this work and who understand the impact of what it means to show up in that state legislature, to do this work in community organizing, and know the importance of litigation as it relates to preserving our civil liberties and fighting for our civil rights. And so that is the work that I do. And as the lead visionary of this organization, we focus on 3 areas. That is voting rights, gender justice, and criminal legal reform. Now you may know the ACLU as this 100-year organization that is an organization that is primarily focused on legal work. So you will know us from Loving v. Virginia, which legalized interracial marriage, and Bergefell, which legalized same-sex marriage. And as I lead this work in Alabama, in these 3 issue areas that I just named, I have to understand the intersectionality of it all. And I understand that we do this work through the frame of racial equity, because we cannot effectively move work in voting rights, in criminal legal reform, and gender justice, which is the intersection of abortion rights and LGBTQ rights, without understanding historically who have been at the forefront of those movements. And historically who have been at the forefront of those movements are Black folks, particularly Black women, who have done that work day in and day out. And that is cohesively an aspect of this work. So when I talk about Black folks, and when I talk about trans folks, and when I talk about folks with disabilities, this is intersectional work. We know that we have to build upon one another to actually move anything forward. And I think that that is very prevalent in this room today. I always have to keep in mind in a space when I come into it Part of leading and organizing in a time such as this, you have to understand history and the critical nature of intergenerational listening and learning. I listened to the woman here, is it Kathy? Kathy. And she spoke about coming into an organization in her 20s. And she received an award by someone named in which she identified individuals as mentors and taking them under her wing. And I want to name the importance of that intergenerational listening and connection. And I find it to be an honor to sit here today and to watch you receive that award. But I also realized what a gift it was for you to receive the investment of women who were at the forefront of the movement. But again, it is important to understand that history and that context. And for me, it's really about a truth-telling. So what does it mean when I say truth-telling, when I come to talk about the League? In preparing for today's remarks, I'm looking into the origin of the League of Women Voters and the history of Alabama's League. And when coming into spaces, it's very important to understand the environment in which I'm in. Historically, contextually, generally. What does this mean based on my identity, who I am, and who my people are? And of course, we go back to June 4th of 1919 when Congress passed the 19th Amendment, and it was enacted in August of 1920, and the League of Women Voters was founded in February of 1920. We have a similar birthday as the ACLU was also founded in 1920. And so what do we do when we're talking about organizations that are 100 years old? What they have seen, what they have done, and the reconciling and reckoning of these organizations in building movements today. Because we are not in a moment, but we are in a movement. All of us are in this broader movement together. And what does that require? It requires a vision that includes each and every one of us. And so I think about an organization that was founded just months before the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. And what it required, it was ushering in a new era of political action. And it was ultimately doing exactly what the title of this convention states, changing the face of democracy for this country. That is what the League, in many ways, was tasked in doing. But I also have to remember who I am. And I know that for at least 45 years plus, the League did not allow Black women into its organization. And I think that's important to note because it will illuminate a bit of the thing that I'm going with here. I learn a lot about the work that I do from oral histories. And it's important to learn in oral histories because these are the communities that I'm accountable to. I'm accountable for folks who were at the forefront of the movement or coming of age in the civil rights movement, and I often sit and listen in addition to my reading, in addition to understanding the landscape politically in this state and how it's impacted the nation. And so I understand that when there was a denial of Black women in the League, we had Mary Burks and Joanne Robinson, who developed the Women's Political Council to direct the Montgomery bus boycott. And they did that work in conjunction with several other women. But what I found interesting was that they still partnered with the League, though the League was an all-white organization. And I found this to be very instructive as we are many decades past this time. And there's an understanding and there's a learning. And there's a grace that I think is extended as we are coming about. And as I learned that the Women's Political Council and many members there later actually held positions of leadership within the League of Women Voters. I thought that that was pretty powerful. And it was instructive because it said a few things to me when understanding the history, contextualizing where we are right now, and the movement that we are in. And there are three things that I thought through as I was reading that history, and specifically how it's impacting Alabama. People will move through obstacles to ensure their rights are granted. Despite a limitation, people will still move to ensure they have the rights that are granted to them. The second is change comes by way of reconciling and understanding our history. I think the League as a whole is representative of that reconciling, understanding where it was limited, understanding its deficiencies, and being intentional about moving forward. And the third piece is institutions cannot stop movements. Let me repeat that. Institutions cannot stop movements. And the reason I'm stating that is because we are coming up on the last 7 days of our legislative session. An institution in our state legislature that consistently is trying to limit us. And I understand the context that y'all have gone over throughout this convention, understanding advocacy, learning and listening to change makers of democracy, hearing truth tellers like a John Archibald. These are individuals and opportunities in which we get to learn about advocacy from a different frame, but something that is very familiar. And so for me, I want to encourage us to understand that people are the ones that start and maintain movements. Change comes when we understand our history. And third, institutions cannot stop us. So how do you remain inspired when you have a state legislature that is so regressive, that tries insistently to tell people what they should and should not be doing with their bodies, who claim to center women but have no interest in centering and caring for women and children in this state, who believe assisting individuals to ensure their voices are heard, creating more obstacles and limitations. We have a crisis in our prisons. 873 bills were passed in the 22 legislative session. I can tell you at least 40 plus bills further cause punitive damage or some type of criminal penalty to further exacerbate a already declining correctional system, carceral system. When you think about these issues, it limits oftentimes where we see ourselves. But I wanted to come and remind you today that being in space like this allows us to reimagine a broader vision that includes all of us. It includes all of us because we cannot move it forward without it. We cannot move forward without young folks and elders and conversations and moving together and understanding the makeup of our state legislature, but also understanding that regardless of what bills and policies are passed, they impact real people and community. And that is our obligation. I love federated organizations and institutions that have spaces in which there are chapters and individuals who are showing up in community. Because that's what it's about. It's about ensuring that our peers and our family members understand the impact of our political system. Because many of us will not have the privilege and the opportunity to just go and jet set to another country. This democracy is ours to save. And the change makers of democracy are right here in this room. And I want us to remember that, because historically, that has always been the case. And as we are reimagining how we look at this work from a political landscape, from a community organizing standpoint, and from a litigation posture. Let us not forget the work that it requires. It requires more than just training. It requires more than us just tracking bills. It requires a sense of compassion, of graciousness, of meeting people where they are, and not getting weary in a fight. Because there are so many who have come before us who did not see this time, but we are tasked with ensuring that we are standing on their shoulders and moving this forward. So, what has inspired me this legislative session, despite so many things that can topple us? I would say packing out hearing rooms in support of trans kids and people to ensure they are not invisibilized or disregarded. If you have the opportunity to come to the first committee meeting where HB 209 was being heard, what you would see is active oppression of individuals, and yet they persisted. We saw the strength of words being delivered by Kathy Jones and others to ensure that we know what is going on, because this is a time of truth-telling. We cannot reconcile and we cannot move forward without it. What keeps me inspired is knowing that despite the limitations that people say in our state legislature are happening, time and time again, we see direct actions, and we see folks moving forward, and we see folks marching, and we see folks standing on the steps of that state house. Because institutions cannot stop movements. And those of you that are here today that remember a time before Rome, understand that while we are doubling back and starting, we will build it stronger and we will build it better. And it seems hard and it seems frustrating because we cannot see it. But the truth of the matter is, in times like this, in conventions like these, when we're doing all the business of the organization, the business of organizations like this are to ensure we move forward with progress in mind. And so I want to encourage you to keep that in mind as you wrap up this convention, but honestly, as you take away so many things that you've learned. And so as I close this out, organizations like the League and grassroots movement leaders in our state continue to fight. And we can't do it alone. Because our vision towards liberation is going to require all of us. That's everyone in this room, that's everyone outside of this room. It requires all of us. And we've seen these values and principles demonstrated throughout our history. A reckoning, a reconciliation, an acknowledgement, a sense of grace, meeting people where they are, mentoring, investing in new leadership. That's what it requires to change the face of democracy. And so my charge to you is to continue leading and to continue building and to stand boldly in the history that you know, but actively the history that you are building. And please know that we are actively building it, because we are not in a moment, we are in a broader movement. Some of us may see it through and some of us may not, but that should never limit us from continuing to not just fight, but to be strategic and intentional in what we build next. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. So it will take time. We have to remain focused. It will require a lot more effort because we are reimagining what this world can be. We are reimagining what Alabama is. And so when I close my eyes and I think of Alabama in 2033, in 2043, in 2053, I think about how it feels. I think about children playing. I think about our education system. I think about the strength of a people working towards progress. And may we not lose that light. and may we not lose that focus. So as we work towards this collective vision, I encourage you not only to be fighting for liberation, but to be fighting for equity, for something larger than ourselves. Thank you all so much.